Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is 45 minutes game number 7. I played this one this morning, and well, it's actually this game was a bit slower because it was 45 minutes and an increment of 10 seconds per move. And I was playing black against a player who calls himself Player 2005, and 2005 is the year when he was born. This means that this is a young man of only 9 years old. Before we started the game, he sent me a chat message asking me how old I was, and I told him I'm 49, and then he said I'm 9. And then I asked him if he was playing in a chess club, and he said yes. And I asked him, do you have an ELO rating? He said yes, it's above 2000. And then I thought, wow, I wish I had a rating of 2000 when I was 9 years old. I mean, if you reach that level at such young age, that's fantastic. So many adults are working hard to get to 1800, and this kid, 9 years old, already 2000. Well, anyway, I was warned then that he was a strong player, and never you should underestimate a young player. So we started the game. He played e4, I played knight to f6, and he continued with e5, knight to d5, d4, d6, the main variation of the Alekhine defense, and knight f3, knight c6, c4, knight to b6, everything normal. And now came the young aggressive nature of this kid. He played e6. This is so typical. This is young players that in the opening they want to attack. This is it's great. I accepted, of course, the pawn, and then he played bishop to e2, and perhaps bishop d3 is perhaps a bit more active, let's say, to prepare eventually an attack against the king side. But he played bishop e2. By the way, this pawn sacrifice actually makes it more difficult for me to develop my light square bishop, and it opens this diagonal here, so eventually a check there is can be a problem for me. And the other question that white puts to black is, how are you going to develop your dark square bishop now? Now this is so closed here, so we need to play g6 and bishop g7, and that's what I did. And then he played h4, again a very aggressive move, preparing h5 later. I simply played bishop to g7, and he played knight to c3. Now I decided it was time to advance my e-pawn so I can use my light square bishop as well. So e5 I played, and he advanced this d-pawn to d5, attacking my knight. Now here I played knight to d4, like this, and he took the knight. I took back with my e-pawn, and then he played knight to b5. So it looks like this pawn on d4 is going to die, and I thought, if I'm going to give back one pawn, then let me do it in a way that I get rid of this strong center of white, this advanced pawn on d5. So I decided to play e5, defending the pawn on d4, so more or less forcing white to take en passant on e6. So d takes e. And now I retook with the bishop. Oh, sorry, no, I played c5, and that was a mistake. Yeah, I should have taken with the bishop. That's it. When we analyzed the game after we finished, this kid invited me to chat on Skype and replay the game together while we were chatting in his best English. He's from the Ukraine, and he speaks quite good English. I mean, it's understandable enough to analyze a game. But then we both agreed that bishop to e6 takes e6 was actually the correct move to make, and then allow white to take here, and then perhaps continuing with bishop f7, or perhaps queen f6, something like that. The nice idea about queen f6 is that eventually I can play castle queenside later and then place a rook on the f-file. But anyway, in the game I made a kind of stupid mistake by playing c5, thinking that I could hold to that pawn, but I missed completely a very obvious move, the move bishop to g5. Attacks my queen has nowhere to go, so there is only one move that I can do, and that is bishop to f6. It takes the bishop, I take back, so now I lost my pair of bishops, and more important, there is a fork on c7, and that's what he did. He played knight c7 check. By the way, knight takes d6 looked also very attractive, but knight c7 is much more clear because he wins the exchange immediately. King to d8, knight takes rook, knight takes knight, and this was the result of this mistake that I made by playing c5. But well, in the meantime he had consumed quite a lot of time. So I thought, okay, he has advantage, but I have a nice pawn on d4, and I'm going to capture this pawn on e6. There is no way to defend it, so there is some compensation. Bishop to g4 was played now. I took on e6 and he traded. Takes, takes, and now he places the queen on e2. I didn't want to trade queens, because if we trade material then the material imbalance becomes more clear. So I wanted to keep the queens on the board, especially because his queen and king are on one line. So I played queen to f6, threatening rook e8 of course, and here he castled queenside, and in the analysis that we did after the game we found out that castling kingside was very interesting. If I then take this pawn, then he can bring one rook to the e-file, probably this one, and the thing is that it's very difficult now for me to defend all these weak pawns on d6 and b7. The queen is ready to go, for example, to f3 or to e6, and it gets very cramped, my position. So this was very well playable, and it's difficult for me to activate this rook on h8. It cannot go to the e-file. It can only go to the f-file, and this pawn is weak. It's not a pleasant position for black. In the game, let's return. He castled queenside. The king of white is much more in open space now, and I need to activate my pieces, of course. Now how to do it? I played knight to b6. My idea is that this knight can go to d7 and then to e5, and on e5 that would be a very good square for that knight, because it supports eventually to continue with this pawn. It attacks c4, it is blocking the e-file, so his rooks are not that strong then. This is perhaps something that you find interesting, that when you are the exchange down, so your opponent has a rook against one of your light pieces, it's important not to open files, because rooks are so strong on open files. So that's why I wanted to blockade this e-file with my knight on e5. Anyway, he played now b3, which, well, I think it looks a bit slow. He wants to overprotect the c4 pawn, so his queen is able to move. I played knight d7, and now again he did a bit of a strange move, g3. There is a logic behind this. Actually, what he wants to do is prevent my knight from going to e5, because if I would play knight e5 now, he can play f4. And I found that a very strong idea, that actually in this position with white, this shows that this 9-year-old kid is already thinking in terms of prophylactic. G3 is a prophylactic move. It's preventing my plan. And I remember when I was 9, I knew the rules of the game. I knew how the pieces could move, and I was able to make a plan, perhaps 2 moves deep and not deeper than that. And this kid is showing that he's already using prophylactic ideas with G3, controlling the square f4. I went now with my rook to e8. He played queen to d2, and now I thought, wait a minute, if I want to play knight e5 and he wants to prevent that with this g3 and f4 idea, I can use now a prophylactic move to prevent his counter move, and that is the move queen to f3. With queen to f3 I'm paralyzing the f pawn, so I'm ready to make my move knight e5 without this counter move of f4. Now rook h to e1 was played. I believe this is move 25, and I believe that I had something like 25 minutes left and he only 7 minutes, something like that. So I was hoping that he would make a mistake. Now the time diminishes, his thinking time. I went as planned with my knight to e5. I find that in this position I have enough compensation for the exchange that I'm down, because my pieces are activated. My knight is beautiful in the center, my queen is controlling this f3, so his pawn doesn't advance. His king is a bit vulnerable, and his pieces are far away from any active attack against my king or any weakness. So I find that this is fine for black. Enough compensation. Now he played king to b1, looking for safety with his king and perhaps not knowing what plan to make. I played rook to f1, threatening the pawn on f2. Now after I did this move, I realized that he could give a check on a5. I actually missed that in my pre-calculation. We had a look at it in the post-mortem, because in this position he played rook to e2. We had a look in the post-mortem analysis to this check, but it doesn't really achieve much, because I just go here, and if it takes here, then let me think, what were we finding in this position? Was it knight d3? I believe we looked at knight d3, and if there is a check, king goes to... no, this can't be right, because he has a check on b7. If I go to c7, he has a check on e7. Oh, wait a minute, so this is not that simple. Perhaps knight c6. Yeah, this looks right. Knight c6. If now he gives a check, I can go now to c7, because the knight controls the e7 square. So the queen must move, for example, a3, and then I can take on f2. And everything is fine. No danger of allowing his pieces to enter. So, well, let's return, because he didn't give this check on a5. He played rook to e2, defending the f2 pawn. And now I continue with king c7, thinking that it was necessary to stop this check, and I needed to go to b8 in case he gives this check. And now a drama happened. He had only about 4 minutes left, so in this time trouble he blundered completely and lost the game in actually one move. He played king to c2, and of course in 2 seconds I played d3 check, and it's all over. He continued a few more moves. King c1, I took here, he took, I took, and he played rook to h1, and he offered me a draw, and I felt like, oh man, it's a 9-year-old kid, shall I accept it or not? And then I thought, no, wait a minute, even if you are a young man, even if you're a kid, a child, you must learn to deal with defeats. You must learn to deal with the feelings, the emotions that this type of blunders bring, because it's going to happen in his life, in the rest of his life, many times. It happens to all of us. Sometimes we blunder and we get angry, or we get sad, or we get experience all these emotions. Chess is a very emotional game. So I declined the draw offer, and I took the pawn, and after king c2 I played e1, queen, checkmate. End of game. Anyway, it was a very nice experience to analyze with him together, and to see how many variations he had looked at, and some he came with some very creative ideas also in this analysis, and he was also asking me questions. Why did you move that, and why didn't you do this? So I'm sure that this boy has a very good attitude to learn chess and to improve more and more. So well, he added me to his friends list, so perhaps one of the next days, or perhaps in a few weeks, or whenever, we are going to play a rematch, and then I hope we have again an interesting game, and it doesn't end like this, because this is not a very beautiful way of ending a game, this blunder king c2. Well, this was the game of today. This evening there is no chess for me, because I'm going to watch the semi-finals of the World Cup between the Netherlands and Argentina. Yesterday, Germany 7-1 against Brazil. My God, that's a story that we could talk hours about that, but this is a video about chess, so I hope you're enjoying the football matches as much as you enjoy the chess games. Alright, thanks for watching again, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.